Hi everyone, I've gathered a bunch of DMs to ask them a question, and this time we are talking about session prep. So my question to all of you is, what is the most challenging part about session prep?
I suspect it might be the same as everybody else here. Time. I have no time. I have a full-time job and I run a YouTube channel that uses up all of my free time. So to actually find time to do anything is very, very difficult. And the only time I can really sort of pull off any kind of prep is not in a normal place. It's like I'll be on the toilet or driving in my car to work, or and I don't. It's not like I can write anything down. I've just got to remember it, and then if I've got a piece of paper, I can scribble it on something. But more than likely, I will forget, and then all of that prep that I did in the car is gone.
You should have a
And
recorder.
yeah, but I find myself just losing stuff. I mean, you forget. So yeah.
Time is always a valuable asset for everybody. And I think I'm okay with the timing, organizing it. It's just trying to organize everybody else to arrive on time. You can organize yourself as much as you can, but if there's circumstances beyond your control, it's always very stressful if someone turns up late or they just can't turn up. So I think after lots of bad experiences, the best thing I've found is to have a one shot tucked in my back pocket, just in case you've only got one or two people there. So you can still have a game, you can still have a good time, but you're not left like you don't have to progress the story with the whole cast, with everybody playing. But yeah, I think that when there's an emergency that's beyond your control and you have to start panicking and like scrabbling around to make sure everything's organized, it can be really stressful. It's like a full panic mode, you know?
Yeah,
But I think that the more you do it, the easier it gets.
absolutely. And I really like the idea of having like a one shot just prepared for anyone who shows up just in case of emergency, because keeping the sessions happening is so important for the health of a campaign. Once you start canceling whenever there's a little emergency for someone, it easily just goes off track and falls down.
For me, it's also like, yeah, it's hard to make myself sit down and do this. Sometimes I don't feel like coming up with stuff. But a creative approach to answering this is so me, despite having it like a channel and teaching people how to DM, I don't think I'm a very good DM myself. And because I like pushing my own stories in game, and that's like sometimes it's like a big no-no for games. Like, oh, you're not an author, like it's a game, and go write a book or something. But hey, I mean, I don't want to write a book. I want to tell my story. But what makes my games like bearable and saves them from being like outright bad is that I recognize this fact. You know, I'm not ignorant to the fact that I'm actually doing a bad thing. So I think sometimes the hardest part is like designing a game. In designing a game is trying to conceal that bad thing and create a perfect illusion of freedom of choice. And
Illusion of choice.
yeah, and I mean, not all my games are like that, like far from that. But if I want to go that route, it's really hard. It's the hardest thing.
Yep, I feel you. Sometimes you want to tell that you have that idea. Maybe it's like the grand finale climactic scene, and you really want to get there, but a lot of things need to align for that to happen. So you kind of create many ways for that to be a thing.
I've kind of
I
taught
think we've all
myself to
been
play
there.
with people's emotions, so that make somebody like hate something so bad. So there is a number of tricks on how to 100% make a player want to do something, and I should make a course on that, like manipulate people.
Maybe you should. Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. I'm not sure. uh, I don't know if this kind of knowledge needs to be out there. I think personally, aside from time, which is actually a great point, and I hadn't considered that, which is absolutely the first thing that is the most challenging thing for me in session prep. But other than that, I often find myself writing for my session prep, and I'm not quite sure like how much is enough, because some of my groups have very different pacings from session to session, and I usually go over. Like I usually write a bit more than we end up using, but sometimes I don't, and then like it's improvised time, and that's fine. But I would rather have something prepared for most, encounters and scenes. I'm that kind of DM. So it took me a while to kind of figure out the system that works with that. But nowadays I'm more confident than I used to be when it comes to the amount of session prep that I have. And actually, a good recommendation is Return of the Lazy Dungeon Masters by Mike Shea. It's a great book for anyone who's struggling with session prep. Really helped me out. So just throwing it out there.
I want to add a nice advice on like always being prepared for like if you don't have anything. So my games, I tend not to use a lot of combat, so it's usually only story. Like we can go 5 sessions without a combat encounter, so that when I'm out of ideas, I can come on. You always know where your story is going, at least a little bit. So you'll have that, and then just throw monsters at players. Combat takes a lot of time. So there you go. And players are gonna be like, "Oh, finally combat," and you're like, "Yeah, I'm just throwing goblins at you. I didn't even design it that well." They're gonna be still entertained.
That's a great example of how every DM has a different style. For example, Folk, you focus on narrative, you focus on playing with people's emotion stories, but I would go at it at a more mechanical video game style perspective, in the sense that the best fun I've had is putting the players in a map and saying, these are lots of interactable objects, be creative, do what you want with them. And it really leads to the players figuring out what the best combination, or if something works. And I think that the ability to let the players feel like they're discovering something new is one of the strong points. But you only learn this sort of style when you've had lots of different DM sessions, and you start to figure out what your favored way of playing is.
Right.
Yeah. Look, one of the things I do, because I would literally run out of time and there'd be no time to prep. So I bought a whole lot of books from Kobold Press called Prepared and Prepared 2. And it's like 1-page adventure and a map. And I can literally read that in 5 minutes if I'm absolutely desperate for different levels. And I just go through the book and like, okay, have I run this one? Do they know about this one? I'll run that. And it's a skeleton. It's not, too extensive, so I can fill in the gaps, and I will. And also too, if I really want to make something that's home brewed, I can just chuck it in there, because you sit down and you make a monster that you think, oh, I'll spend half an hour, the next thing it's 3 hours later. So it happens. It does if you start messing with stuff. So I do that, and then I used to get myself to a position where I'd go straight from work and I have to do this sort of thing, and I'd have nothing prepared. I had no idea, and I'd just have to suffer and make it up on the spot. So I'm not suggesting that is a good strategy for learning how to prep. So like, don't do any prep and just run into the game and just see what happens, because you may find that incredibly stressful. I remember the butterflies would tear me apart, and I wind up having to go to the toilet a lot. So, but yes, really short adventures that you can use like Lego bricks when you just don't have quite enough time to do all the work you needed to. Really, really helpful for cheating.
Yep. I think like even if you somehow have like an hour to read them even the night before, that can be so valuable. I mean, just to have something in mind, even to think about and kind of develop until the session. But yeah, that's awesome. That's a good tip. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can we find you all? Fred, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on YouTube, surprisingly, like everybody else here. How to D&D, my name is Fred Wheeler. And you can also find me on Twitter and Facebook, probably other places as well, but I'm not going to tell you about those.
You'll have to investigate and figure out on your own. Rich, where can we find you?
Oh, Rich Merry, the YouTube channel, and that's probably the main place you can find me. I'm on Discord and Twitter and all of those sort of things, but check the YouTube channel if you want to see any of the other content I've made.
Excellent. And Volkert, where can we find your content?
Lutz and I's YouTube channel.
Awesome. And of course, there will be links for everything in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us, and remember that you are awesome. Until next time, we'll see you all beyond the screen. Bye!